Good afternoon. My name is Carrie Homan, and today I will be discussing rules, both good and bad, that exist in the school that I teach at, Papillion La Vista South High School, as well as guidelines I would use if I was making rules as an administrator. And then last, I will discuss the characteristics of Weber's ideal bureaucracy and how they are alive and well in the school that I'm at. So first, we'll start with rules. I do teach at a high school, a large Class A high school. So we have some rules that maybe some of you wouldn't see in the school that you teach at. The first rule that I want to discuss, and I'll start with the ones that are more beneficial, is that a student has 10 school days to drop a class. So at the beginning of the semester, a lot of students decide, I don't really want to take this class, or I would rather take this class instead. Well, they only have 10 school days to do that. This is beneficial for the student so that they don't fall behind, as well as the teachers who need to catch them up. Oftentimes, the first day of school, students are learning new material. And if they're not learning new material on the first day, then most definitely they're learning material on the second day. So if a student even misses 5 days of a class before switching into that class because they changed their schedule, they have to make up those 5 days of material, and the teacher has to work with them to catch up on those 5 days of material. So our school cuts it off at 10 days. Even 10 days is a lot of school to miss if you're not in the class to begin with. After 10 school days, if a student does not want to be in a class anymore, they have to withdraw pass or withdraw fail. And they can either take a study hall or, depending on how many credits they have and what grade that they're in, just not have a class at all. So that's a rule that I really like. A second rule that is beneficial, and this is a rule for students, teachers. We have rules for students, and obviously we have rules for teachers to follow. Teachers must sign out in the front office if they are going to leave the building, and then sign back in upon returning. During a planned period, it is okay for a teacher to leave the building, especially if they're like a coach or a club sponsor, and they need to go buy something for practice, activity, whatever it may be. That is acceptable, but they have to sign out and sign in. This is important so we can account for where the teachers are. If there is some sort of emergency situation, tornado, fire, lockdown, intruder in the building, we have to account for where students and teachers are. If we can't find a teacher and we don't know why, that would be quite the headache. So it's important that we know where teachers are, even if they're leaving for 10 minutes at a time. The third rule that I want to talk about on the good side would be for students and their process for checking back into the building. If a student arrives late to school, or if they get called out and they return back to school, they have to check in at the front office. This seems kind of obvious, but when a student comes back to school and it's during passing period or during lunch, they think that it's okay to just go to class or go to lunch. And then they show up in the class and the attendance gets messed up because it says that they're not supposed to be there. So one reason would be our attendance system is set up to where if a student gets called out, they're called out for the rest of the day until they get checked in. So that would be one obvious reason that they need to check in at the front office. But then it's also important that we know when they come into the building for a lot of different reasons. If their parents need to know what time they came back, we can report to them. We're liable for them when they get to our school. And then again, for any sort of emergency type situation, it's important for us to know that they are back in the building. Now I'll discuss a few rules that can get a little messy, I guess could be a word to describe it. Sometimes they can be more of a hindrance than a help. So the first rule is that when we are enrolling students for classes to take the next year, if they want to take an honors or an AP course, they must get a teacher recommendation signature from the teacher they have currently. So, for example, I teach honors pre-calculus. If I'm going to recommend a student to take AP calculus the following year, they would need my approval, and I would have to sign their enrollment sheet. I really like this rule. However, if a student is not recommended for a class, if their parents want them to take it, they can override the teacher not recommending them and still take it. So this is a rule that has a good purpose, but the purpose doesn't always get utilized. So sometimes that can be frustrating if teachers put in this work to figure out which kids would be successful in certain classes, and then the recommendation can be overridden by the parent. Another rule we have is that if a student misses, if they have 5 unexcused periods, then they get put in school suspension. I agree that we should have a punishment for skipping class. However, from a teacher standpoint, if a student has been gone from your class, they're behind on their work. And if they get pulled for an additional day, they are now getting further behind. It's a lot different trying to, in my case, learn math, when you're in school versus at home or in school suspension. So sometimes I feel like it hinders the learning process because they're already gone from your class and now they're going to be gone even more. So I wish there was just a different way we could punish the students for skipping class as opposed to pulling them out again. The third rule I want to discuss under the not so awesome rules would be, this is a rule for teachers. Teachers have to fill out a form online if they're going to be gone. They also have to call SubFinder if they're going to be gone unexpectedly. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to do both. So if you know you're going to be gone, you can fill out the form and talk to the secretary about getting you a sub. However, if you wake up one morning and you are sick and you cannot go to school, you have to call SubFinder so they can get you a sub, but then you also have to go online and fill out a form. The paperwork gets a little much, and a lot of teachers forget that they have to go and fill out those forms because they feel they've already called SubFinder. They forget that they need to fill out that second form. So it gets to be kind of a headache for the secretaries because they either have to remind you or fill that form out for you, and then it just gets kind of messy. So those would be the rules that are there for a good reason, but sometimes they get in the way. When I'm an administrator, if I were to make rules, some guidelines I would follow would be the following. Are they beneficial for students? I think that's the number one thing we have to think about. As a school, our whole goal is to help these students become successful citizens. Are they learning? Are they being successful? Are these rules going to benefit them in that process? We have to make sure that they're not hindering our students, they're not getting in the way of their learning. Are these rules taking away distractions? Are these rules becoming distractions? Another guideline, are these rules easy to understand? Are these rules easy to carry out? And thirdly, can they be carried out consistently? So obviously, these rules need to be easy to understand. But can they be carried out consistently. So is one teacher going to interpret this rule different than another teacher? I know that's something that can be frustrating for students if we have a rule, but Mrs. XYZ lets me do this, but Mrs. ABC interprets it a different way. It creates tension in the classroom and frustration for students because they don't know what they can and can't do, or they have to change their behavior from classroom to classroom. So can these be carried out consistently, no matter how big or small the school is? There are 5 characteristics of Weber's ideal bureaucracy. We have division of labor, rules, hierarchy of authority, impersonality, and competence. While looking at the descriptions of these characteristics and thinking about my school, a lot of these seem like they're easily built into any school system. For example, the division of labor. I feel like no matter what school you are at, no matter how big or how small, there is a division of labor present. You have your administrators taking care of the administrative jobs. You have your teachers teaching the subjects. You have your secretaries taking care of answering phones, working with the money, ordering supplies, etc. As far as Papillion La Vista South High School, we have an administration team. So we have one head principal, 3 assistant principals, and then a 4th assistant principal who is the activities director. Each of the principals have a different job. So the activities director, he takes care of the sports and activities. The head principal and the 3 assistant principals, they each take a grade level to where they work with. So we have a 9th grade principal, and then the other 3 principals follow a class from 10th, 11th to 12th grade. So as far as rewards and discipline, they follow a class and they work with that specific class. They also divide up jobs as far as one works with more of the technology side of things, one assistant principal works with more of the data and the NISA tests, things like that. So even within our administrative team, there's a division of labor. Obviously with the teachers, you have your different departments. You have your math teachers, you have your English teachers, you have your art teachers, etc. And then you have your cafeteria workers, your paras, your secretaries, all dividing up the tasks to help our students and help our school run and function. The second characteristic is rules. First 10 minutes of my video has been talking about rules and guidelines. They're in place for a reason. They're in place for teachers and they're in place for students, all with the goal in mind to help our students be successful. The third is the hierarchy of authority. Essentially, we have a chain of command. In my high school, we have a lot of staff members. I think we have over 100 teachers or around 100 teachers. And so we have a chain of command that's important to follow, not only within our school, but within the school district. So me as a math teacher, if I have a question or concern, I first need to approach my department head. From there, my department head can either give me advice on what to do, or either he or I will then go to the principal. That would be the chain of command within our school. From there, we have the principals can then report to different superintendents. We have a superintendent and 3 or 4 assistant superintendents at our central office that they can report to. So within our building, there's a chain of command. That would be for more of curriculum and parent-student teacher interactions and questions. We also have a chain of command for technology, which I find very unique and interesting. if we have a technology issue, we first have to approach somebody within our department. Every department should have somebody that's on the technology committee. If that person cannot be helpful, then we have what we call Titan Techs. So 2 class periods a day, we have students that are Titan Techs that are there to help with technology issues. If a Titan Tech cannot fix the problem, then we can ask the technology supervisor in our school to help us at that point. This is a really nice system set up. That way the head of the technology in our school doesn't get overwhelmed with questions that other teachers can help answer. The next characteristic would be in personality. Is there a social distance between teachers and administrators? This is one that I feel would be the hardest, especially the smaller the community, the closer people are who live in that community. Being in Papillion, we're a part of the metro area of Omaha. Teachers and administrators are further spread out as far as where they live in the community. Some people live in Papillion, some people live in other parts of Omaha. So it might be a little bit easier to keep that social distance in a place like Omaha where people can be more spread out, as opposed to towns who only have a few hundred people and everyone, lives so close together. I feel that our administration does a good job of drawing that line. They don't draw the line so much that you feel like you can't approach them about things, but they do draw that line very well. The last characteristic of Weber's is competence. Are people qualified to be working in your building? I feel like this is another characteristic that is very easy for school systems to implement. To be a teacher, you have to have a teaching license. That would make you a qualified employee. So if you have a teaching license, you can teach. If you don't have a teaching license, I know there's provisional license, which I think count as being qualified. But if you don't have a teaching license or a provisional teaching license, you can't teach. So a school district kind of already has that built in. Are these people qualified? If you have your administration degree, you can be an administrator. That would make you a qualified employee. So I think that any school district would meet that characteristic, and my school does as well. So those would be the 5 characteristics and how they are in my school, and that would wrap up my Chapter 2 assignment. Thank you for watching.